You order for the box.
Oh,
Yeah.
trust me. My dog's the same way. I can buy all the dog beds in the world, but the moment he sees a box, he's like, "Oh, that's fine. I want that."
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
You order
Okay,
box.
we are live on YouTube. Oh, and so, hello everyone. Welcome, Inspires. My name is Alejandro Abanez. You probably see me as the Mike Lead Alumni Director or just general support overall. I'm here with Melanie, one of my favorite friends, and I'll let her do a little bit of intro and bio about herself because when Melanie and I get into a room together, we end up talking about all the things, but I'm glad she could join us today because she's a great person in cybersecurity to know, has will challenge you and remind you of everything in life that you need to know while you're entering the tech field. Melanie, I'll let you say a short intro about yourself and we'll go from there.
Sure. Well, I guess fortunately, humility is not a cross that I bear because that is a very generous introduction. Um, but hi, everyone. My name is Melanie Ensign. I am the founder and CEO of Discernible. Discernible is a security and privacy communications firm. So we are highly specialized and we work specifically and exclusively with the security and privacy teams inside of organizations to up-level their communication and influence skills so that you can actually be more persuasive with business decision makers, product teams, engineering teams, things like that. I spent a decade working with cybersecurity teams in Silicon Valley. Very, very dear friends that I had the pleasure of working with and seeing their challenges and the struggles that they had, even from a communications perspective, even though they had all of the technical knowledge and they were absolutely right in many of their recommendations. It was very frustrating and heartbreaking at several points to just see them struggle in terms of influencing the outcomes within the organization. So we are focused on helping them up level their the position of their function and of their leadership team. We teach a lot of CISOs how to be political players at the highest levels of an organization, which is not something that a lot of folks are trained on when they step into that role. And so, teaching them how to build alliances, coalitions, how to work with the C-suite and their board of directors. We spend a lot of time on those kinds of challenges as well. We are very fortunate to be celebrating our 5th year anniversary this week. So yes, it have lots of things that I could share about starting your own company, running a small business, what it's like to to own a company inside of cybersecurity. We can talk about those things down the road if you're interested, Alejandro,
Perfect.
in terms of things that we can talk about. Prior to starting Discernible, I led security, privacy, and engineering communications at Uber for 4 years. Um, saw a lot of things during my time there. A lot of really wonderful things in terms of cross-functional collaboration and communication. In fact, when I accepted the position at Uber, it was in my mind specifically to prove out my hypothesis in terms of how a security communications program could actually work in up-leveling the investment, the skills, and the expertise of the technical teams. And prior to being at Uber, I spent a very short 18 months doing security communications at Facebook. There's a long history about why that was not a right fit.
But she stayed
uh,
longer than the average employee, short 18 months. If you remember, our little profiles will say lengths of history at company.
yeah, I mean, and we can talk about that too. And honestly, I think a lot of people that I respect and consider to be friends, disagreed with my assessment and some of my decisions for why I left Facebook. But it was the right decision for me. I don't regret it for a second. Um, and then prior to that, I actually worked at a PR firm for 6 years. where I was an embedded team member in the chief security organization at AT&T. So I led their cybersecurity communications for a very long time as well. Couple of things that we navigated through during my tenure there was the very first iPad hack back when it was still an exclusive for AT&T. So I have lots of Weave drama stories for the OGs who recognize that name. I went through the NSA revelations with AT&T as well, and there's a lot of interesting takeaways from that experience. The other thing that I did, in addition to my 9-to-5 work, for the last 10 years, I've been retired from this piece for about 2 years now, but I led the press department at DEF CON for a decade. So a lot of interesting stories and experiences there too. For folks who aren't familiar, DEF CON is the largest hacker conference that happens in Vegas every year. It happens the same week as Black Hat and B-Sides Las Vegas. So just a lot of activity happening that week in Sin City. And I think, what was that?
Yeah, it's an adventure for that part.
Yeah. And I recognize that my experience is different as, being part of the leadership team there. I don't think I ever really had a normal DEF CON experience. And so I have a lot of empathy and admiration for the folks who do trek out to Mecca every year for that. And one interesting tidbit just for folks to be aware of, even though my professional background is in communications and I have a master's degree in corporate communications, my undergraduate started in marine biology. So if you hang out with me long enough or read enough of my content online, you will see a lot of references to sharks, to scuba diving, to navigating underwater emergencies and how that applies to cybersecurity incidents. So I have tried really hard to find balance in my life between the things that I do for my career and the things that I do to fulfill and heal my soul. But we're all human, and life kind of teaches the same lessons regardless of which path you go down, right? So there is a lot of overlap, I think, in terms of the principles and the takeaways that I have from both my shark science and scuba diving life to what I'm doing now in cybersecurity.
So I love that. You have similar to our Aspires, you have like a wide range of experience, and it's not that everybody sets out right away to be like, oh, I want to be in cyber. I did XY computer science. I did informatics. I did this. A lot of our aspirers come from all over the country and have a different range of experiences. Can I ask what initially inspired you to make that switch from marine biology into like cybersecurity and communications comms?
I don't think I actually made that choice initially. So when I was working at this PR firm, I was living in Boston at the time, right after grad school. And I was working with several technologies and technology and sustainability companies, right? Because I had this background in science communication, and I was really good at translating some of those technical complex ideas into things that different stakeholders and audiences could understand, right? And helping to articulate, why does any of this matter, right? And I was at an agency that had 80 plus offices all over the world. It was one of the things that attracted me to that position. And during one of my, one-on-one meetings with my manager, I said, look, I'm only working with our Boston office and our New York office, and I would really like more international experience. That's why I'm at a big agency and not like a small specialized boutique. And, I told her I was willing to learn something new. If, it's not like I expected that there was going to be like the perfect shark science client walking through the door. And, the first thing that she brought my way was working with the chief security office at AT&T. And I said, sure, I can learn this. I spent every weekend of the first several months just reading every book I could possibly find. This was back in the day when we read physical books. And many of those books were written by AT&T's chief security officer, or who was at the time. He was there for 30 years. So, also before the 2 year like CISO tenure. I have some thoughts about that as well.
Burnout
But
is real. Burnout is real for
I think the reason the tenure is so short is because most people are not ready for this role, to be honest. But I had to learn it from scratch, and I was very, very fortunate that the team at AT&T was very supportive of helping me learn. And I asked a lot of questions. I worked with them for 6 years. This is really where I cut my teeth in cybersecurity. And the fact that I started at a massive, global ISP and mobile network meant that I was also exposed to a lot of different types of incidents, different types of complexities. We were having to deal with public inquiries and regulatory inquiries before a lot of other companies had to, right? Because we were the telephone company, we were the internet company, and stuff just affected us before it affected others. And so it was a really interesting way to learn. Like I said, I was with them for 6 years before I went over to Facebook. But I think one of the most important aspects that allowed me to learn so much while I was with that team, and this is the key takeaway for any aspiring security leaders who may be tuning in, is the reason I was given that much support was because the CSO from day one demonstrated how much he respected me as a team member and made it very clear that he expected everybody else on his team to give me what I needed. And that was, sometimes the messenger has a bigger impact than the message itself. And the fact that it came down from the most senior person on the team, that I was to be treated as if I was a member of their team, and that he expected everybody to help me get up to speed really quick and to help me do my job to the best of my ability by being my subject matter experts until I had really nailed down some of these topics up on my own. That made all the difference, and he continues to be a really important mentor in my career even today.
I love that. He put his neck out and he said, hey, especially when it comes to cybersecurity, it's all about having everybody in the room and being visible and saying like, hey, everyone brings a different wide range of experiences to it, and shutting anybody else out is not, we've seen it before, those managers or those IT people who are like, you're not technical. And it becomes a whole scenario. Well, okay, so you've had key pillars throughout your career, like at AT&T, at Facebook. Can you share about a moment or an experience that like really solidified that whole passion you have? Because I think I've seen people who talk about cybersecurity, Melanie, and then I've seen you talk about cybersecurity. And I'll say every time I attend one of your talks, whether at the MiC conference, whether seeing you in person, I always come out of it being like, damn, she's doing it right. And just inspired to be like, you know what? I don't want to give up on this field. I don't want to give up on this passion. How do you have a moment that solidified this decision for you, or how do you stay energized about the field in general? I know it's a two-part question. All right.
Yeah, and really complicated question. I don't know that there was an exact, like, if just one moment. I think there was a series of moments that just further reiterated, kind of like re-energized my commitment to this particular field and discipline. I really think a big part of it was graduate school. And this is not a commercial for graduate school. It's not for everybody, and it's very expensive. So if you don't know why you're doing it, it probably is not the right thing in this moment. But like I mentioned, my graduate degree is in corporate communications, and in the program that I went through, it included things like investor relations, like finance management. I went to grad school because I wanted to understand, how do you actually make money as a communicator? What is the business of communications, right? Because I understood communications was more than just, can you write well, and can you get across an understandable email, right? There was strategy and power behind really meaningful impactful communications. And I wanted to understand how that works as a business. So that's why I went to grad school. And because I went through a number of these programs, including communications research, communications ethics, it really solidified in my mind a quantitative approach to how do we know if we're communicating well, right? I don't just operate on vibes when it comes to how I measure success as a communicator. And as a result of that, I think when I first got into security, which was before, I mean, you probably even remember security was not always like the cool kid in the room, right?
it wasn't, yeah.
Which to be fair, I think is partly why like my heart bled for those like early engineers that I first worked with, because they were such wonderful people trying to do amazing things, and they just didn't have the right message or the right skills to articulate what they were working on and why it mattered, right? And so going through that graduate program really solidified for me that there is very specific value in doing this kind of work and doing it well. And when I first got introduced to the world of cybersecurity, back when we were still making fun of the fact that people were using cyber in front of security,
And
I just felt like this is a field that could really use these skills. These are wonderful people. And I have the training and the education and the knowledge to help them elevate their position, to help them become more effective at what they're already doing, because I think a lot of us are in this because there is a mission bigger than ourselves. That as much as I love the challenge and the interesting ins and outs of the field, right, that I do find it personally fulfills my curiosity and my need to constantly be learning. I'm not just out there learning how to plant sunflowers. I'm learning something that I truly believe makes, the world a better place. And that sounds cliche, but for the amount of time that I spend doing this work, I'm not sure I could motivate myself to be this engaged if I didn't truly believe that.
yeah. And it was, however, like the landscape has changed throughout the last, and I'm not trying to date anybody here, but you've had an extensive experience and you've seen cybersecurity change through your career. I guess one, do you have any advice for students who are entering now with the field and are wanting to figure out, because as much as I like to say that, the only constant is change in our career, especially with cyber, because everything is so rapid. One day you're in, one day you're out. I guess how do they not get desensitized to that like constant change, and how, in your experience, how have you dealt with that constant change?
Sure. So I think the first thing we have to do is admit that this isn't unique to cybersecurity.
No.
The world is just changing all the time.
No.
I mean, I even think about what folks working in agriculture have had to deal with over the last 3 or 4 months, right? They never thought their world would be changing this quickly at the pace that it is. And yet it is, because the world just happens sometimes. And we can't control everything that happens outside of ourselves. So I do just kind of want to level set in the sense that if you are scared of change, that's not security specific, right? But the change is actually kind of what keeps my curiosity going. Once I already know everything, I mean, what do I get up for if I know exactly how everything's going to go today,
Sure.
right? So I think one of the things that I think about is bringing order to chaos. So I think when people worry about change, what they're really reacting to is the uncertainty. There's an uncertainty about the stimuli around us, the people, the situations, the technology. Sure, those things are going to change, and to some extent, they can be unpredictable. But there need to be things in our life that are constant, that we can hold on to. It's one of the reasons why I think it's so important to have things in your life outside of your 9 to 5 job. And I realize that that is a tall order, especially for folks who are early on in their career. When I was younger, my career was so tied to my identity. I
Mhm.
spent years and years and years and a lot of Uber's money in therapy to undo that really
Same.
toxic connection. But I still had things that were important to me. In fact, one of the reasons why I started working with DEF CON and why I stayed with them for as long as I did was because that wasn't my 9 to 5 job. That was volunteering and giving back to the community. And it was still within the same, industry, but it was a release compared to, 9 to 5 grind work, right? So, and that really sustained me for a long time because I just had these other things that were really important to me where, when my job was driving me insane or my manager just was not hearing me, I had other things that I could pour my energy and my commitment and my loyalty into that I did not have to feel 110% passionate about my job every moment of the day. I needed to feel satisfied and fulfilled with the overall kind of net outcome that I was getting from the experience. I had jobs that I really, really hated, but I made sure that I was getting something out of those, right? Even more than just paying my rent. I needed to make sure that this was a stepping stone to something new, or that there was an opportunity for me to explore something or learn something that I could use in my next role or my next adventure, because my job never existed at any of these companies before I went there and made them, right? So I think that's just going to be increasingly true for the folks who are entering security now. The job you're going to have in 5 years probably doesn't exist right now.
No.
So I think we end up beating our head against the wall, aspiring for certain job titles or certain positions, when the fact of the matter is that because the world is changing so quickly, the jobs of the future just haven't been invented yet. So instead of looking at the job title that you want, think about what kind of work do you want to be doing? What kind of organizations do you want to be working with? What kind of impact do you want to have on the world? And I think that that's going to serve you far better than going, oh, my next job is going to be this, or one day I want to be a CISO. You probably don't really want to be a CISO. uh, but but even but the and even that role is changing, right? There's a lot of uncertainty about whether or not that role will even exist in the future.
We're looking at
So
division happening right now with like BISO, CISO, and like all these extra like specialties within it too. And
yeah, well, the other thing is that there's a lot of vanity titles. We have enough people in the industry now who have decades of experience where they're simply not going to accept a role that has a job title that doesn't include the letter C. And, I think to some extent it's okay, how do we attract people with a lot of experience and expertise into these roles that are not truly senior executive roles, but need that kind of experience? And so I think, the job title plus compensation strategy attracts people to those roles, even though they're not truly in charge of an entire organization,
yeah.
right? But I think, one of the things that we talk about a lot in cybersecurity is turning this function into one of shared accountability across the entire organization, so that it's not only the security team's responsibility to ensure better outcomes, right? So if we are effective in persuading our developer colleagues and our product colleagues and our customer support colleagues and our C-suite leadership, if we are truly successful in getting everybody on board with the mission of security, we will not need this large of an organization focused exclusively on security. And we may not need one person to lead that charge if all the other executives have bought into this strategy. Now, I think we have a long way to go at a lot of these companies to make that true. But I think sometimes we take for granted the fact that our whole mission in certain parts of security is to work ourselves out of that job. We don't need massive, massive, massive AppSec teams if we can make development more secure. And I don't want to imply that we won't need anybody with these areas of expertise. I'm just implying that we want these skill sets to be infused into other organizations so that it is not only on our plate. And if we have better practices across the business, I don't need 200 engineers doing code review, which is a win for humanity, right?
And it's funny because, ironically, my next question, just so you can mentally bank it real quick, was what I know we have to talk about AI at one point in this security privacy chat. It was like, what are some current cybersecurity trends you find most impactful or concerning? How do you see these trends shaping the future of the industry? Because I know you probably have a PR answer, and then you and I had a bar answer for this one. I'll say I agree with you. I think the goal is to have one, automate this out, and then two, build a security culture from everybody. At every job I'm at, even whether it's megacorp or small like Fortune or small like company of 10 people, I always try to encourage like, hey, what are we doing for code reviews? Please think about security. It's only one person right now, but if we build this right at this stage or this stage, we can make sure we can keep lean efficiencies across the org throughout.
Mm-hmm.
And building that out. I completely agree with you on that part. So, what are some trends that you're seeing in your field and in your business, like especially when you're talking to clients? Anything concerning? Anything that you want to highlight for our apprentices, our aspirers?
Sure. So this is, I will say, I think one area that's often overlooked by a lot of aspiring cybersecurity professionals and folks that are moving into the field. The area right now where I'm seeing some really, really interesting challenges that I don't think are talked about enough is Web3. Now, Web3 has interesting challenges because it is almost entirely a dumpster fire when it comes to security. And if you understand Web 2, you can be really useful in Web 3 because as much as Web 3 wants to pretend that they are the new kid on the block, that's a reference for my fellow elder millennials, Web 3 is built on top of Web 2 infrastructure.
Completely.
So it is, if you understand Web 2, you can have profound impact in Web 3 technologies in terms of improving security. So there's a lot of really interesting things if you're looking for kind of where is there something interesting and novel to work on. I think Web3 is a good place to go cut your teeth and learn something interesting and really develop a specialty and expertise that perhaps will set you apart from others in the field. And oh, and I've just lost my train of thought. It was going to be amazing.
Oh, good. You're talking about building Web 3 is top of the infrastructure of Web 2, and if you're focusing on the right stuff of Web 2, you can bring it over to Web 3.
Yep, that sounds great.
Okay.
Oh, I know what I was going to mention. Particularly if you like incident response or you want more incident response experience very quickly early on in your career, Web3 has incidents all the time. They last minutes. So think about how Web 2 does these really long 4-hour, sometimes multi-day tabletop exercises. In Web 3, you have minutes to deal with inactive exploits. So and most of the time, these companies don't have dedicated security staff. So even if you're a software engineer or developer, you can get frontline incident response experience very quickly in the Web3 space. So they have a lot of challenges, but they also have some really impressive constraints that I think is kind of like creating some diamonds because the pressure and the heat is so high. So I think
Especially
it's
for
a good
15
opportunity.
minutes. Like if us, I can't even imagine. My incident responses are usually 3 to 4 hours. Like where I'm like, hey, here's the 5 whys, here's the postmortem, here's the QC, here's the logs, and then like capture and respond, build the case notes, build the what do we call it? I always forget it. How are we preventing this in the future? Processes.
Yeah. Yeah, I was doing my company does weekly incident response communications drills. So once a week, our subscribers just jump into our Slack for an hour and we run them through a scenario for 60 minutes to test and practice their communication skills. And we did one a couple of weeks ago that was specific to Web3. And one of our participants noted that there are a lot of incidents in Web3 where, he was saying maybe nothing is wrong necessarily, but you still go broke because the stakes are so high in these types of incidents that, a lot of stuff doesn't have to be stolen or broken in order for you to be completely leveled.
Yep.
And so the pace of these incidents is so fascinating to me. It's just the way that the technology is built. And I think it's a really interesting learning environment for folks who are just getting into security now.
Okay. One, love that your company does incident response communication drills. That sounds amazing. I definitely need to touch up on that and brush through mine. Mine right now are, hello, we are having an outage. Please
Oh, so
wait.
now you're getting into the AI portion of the conversation.
Literally, let me call ChatGPT.
My chatbot wrote this for me.
Oh,
Hello, world.
that's a whole other level of leakage, which I laugh about all the time. So, speaking of your business, then, what are some of your biggest obstacles you faced while building out your firm? Like, how did that come across after leaving your last corporate gig?
Sure. So, full disclosure, I incorporated my company a full year before I left my last in-house role, in part because I was near the end of my time there. I could just tell that the end was coming, and I was really worried that I would rage quit and not have a backup plan. And I'm a professional contingency planner,
Yeah.
so I'm like I have to know what I'm going to do in case this moment happens. And so I incorporated my company early. I squatted on all of our domains for an entire year. And I was actually laid off along with thousands of employees in the middle of the pandemic while my boss negotiated for a multi-million-dollar raise. So the day that I got the email letting me know that my position was being eliminated was the day I turned on my website. And that's our launch day. That's how I remember that day. This is our anniversary. This is our launch day. It is a really, really positive and empowering moment of time in my memories that has nothing to do with me leaving my last job.
I love that. And especially for having such a, you turned the negative into such a positive too. And during the pandemic. Ooh, that's a fun.
Yeah. But the thing is, like, that requires a lot of planning. And I think, we all know organizations that really struggle to plan and prepare. And if you are to me, the most important thing about being prepared is it gives you choices. The freedom of choice is only available if we are prepared to pursue those options, right? Had I not been ready to just flip the switch with this company, and had I not already over the past several years been planning my business and getting clients ready in my pipeline. Like we had our first client by the end of the first week because this was in the works already, right?
Yeah, you had your.
And yeah, and so, this is something that I've been talking a lot about even with clients recently is, in cybersecurity, we think a lot about what can go wrong. Well, from a communications perspective, because I'm thinking about things like trust and reputation and, getting to the other side of an incident in a better position than when we started, right? I'm often asking what can go right. So I'm imagining if this were to go perfectly, I can't control whether or not every incident will happen or not. There's a lot of things I can do to minimize them, but I don't have 100% control over whether or not an incident happens in any given moment. I don't have a lot of control over what other people will do. I don't have a lot of control over what countries will do, right? Um, and so being prepared is the best investment I can make for myself and my business so that we have options, so that we're not forced into decisions or down a path that does not work for us. And I think this is applicable not just in the cybersecurity sense in terms of making sure that your organization is in fact prepared for certain things. And I don't even mean just like breaches and compromises, but your day-to-day conversations about how you build product, your day-to-day conversations about how you treat your customers and honor their consent, right? If you're not prepared for those moments, there aren't a whole lot of options for you on the table. And that is a really important lesson that we work with our clients to institute into and to build into their plans and their decision-making process so that they're not inadvertently shutting themselves out of potential opportunities down the road. But that also applies to our personal and professional plans for ourselves, right? I had a mentor as an undergrad. I was applying for different internships and things, and I really struggled to sell myself as somebody early in my career. I was one of those like millennial kids who really believed what they told us, that if you work hard and have good grades, things will just happen, right?
Yeah, the best of the world will come. Tell me you were a magnet student without telling me you're a magnet student.
And so I was floored when I learned that I actually had to market myself, right? To get my first job out of college. And, my mentor who was helping me work on a lot of these applications, she was like, the most important PR job that you will ever do is PR for yourself. And so that has always stayed with me. I mean, I've been out of college for a very, very long time at this point, but I still remember that. And everything that I have done about, okay, what am I counseling my clients to do? And how am I preparing them? And like, am I doing all of those things for myself?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Am I making sure that I have a contingency plan, that I have backup plans, that I have other options that I can pursue? I think, I know that this does not work for everybody at every stage of their career. It didn't work for me initially at first because this is a very expensive hobby. But scuba diving is a big part of my life. I dive several times a week because it is what recharges me. It's what heals me. And quite frankly, it's what prevents me from like losing my shit when clients, come and I'm like, you did what?
Wait,
Just having that consistent moment of Zen, if you will, right? Because literally nobody can talk to me underwater and it's amazing. But like I said, that's an expensive hobby. That wasn't something that I could do all the time when I was younger and early in my career. And when I was living in California, the water was so freaking cold that it wasn't something that I wanted, that I could do as often as I wished. And so, when I was in the stage of my life where I could make different decisions about where I live and what I do for my job, I made sure that they would support this piece of my life that was really, really important to my sanity and well-being. And, so if 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 you're able to find something like that that can balance, that fulfills you, that pushes your intellectual and curiosity and enjoyment as much as your professional work, don't put that off if it's something that you can afford to do now. I will tell you that before I could afford to dive as much as I do, I did lots and lots of jigsaw puzzles, and I still do lots of jigsaw puzzles. I love them. I finish them. I send them to my mom so that she can do them. Like it's like getting a massage for my brain is what it feels like. And that is very, very inexpensive compared to scuba diving. So if you can find these things that make you whole, that make you proud of who you are, not just in terms of like your character and your integrity. I'm just assuming everybody listening is a good person already, but it can be proud of yourself because you're taking care of yourself, right? That you don't feel shame about what you are kicking down the road in terms of your mental health and your physical health.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially since jobs take a toll on you, especially if you're not in a safe place, I guess would be the best way to say it, or you're in a comfortable place. Those will start to take a toll mentally and physically on you, no matter what. I think you highlighted something very important is that you're kicking it down the road by delaying, especially when you are in a situation that isn't your best and you can self-validate. I think that another thing I want to pull like a key nugget from there is you and I have a similar journey of like my early career was super like my work is everything, boom, boom, boom. And even being underleveled, underskilled on certain items or underleveled, overskilled on certain items led to me being like, well, the longer I stayed at that place, the more I started being like, maybe I just am this. Maybe I don't have those skills. And suddenly I get plucked from there, dropped into a mega corp environment. And I'm like, oh, wait, like even in a room full of all stars, I'm still batting a good average. I'm still hitting what I need to hit. It just, you needed the opportunity to shine. And I validated myself through CTFs and other items as well. Like I found my own happiness. Also, validating yourself and finding your happiness. I think you do an excellent point of choosing something outside of our day-to-day job versus doing something inside of our day-to-day job.
And I think at least, and I will just speak for myself, but I'm sure I'm not the only one. I gave my employers way, way, way too much credit early on in my career in regards to my skills, my capabilities, that like I measured myself against the logo on my paycheck.
Yep.
And the reality is they gave me some resources. They gave me some opportunities. They should have. I was working for them. Right? But the things that made me good at my job, the things that made me a good professional, the things that made me effective in my role were things that I did, things that I invested in, the work and dedication that I put in to better myself, to improving my skills. Even if that resource was being provided by my employer, I'm the one that did the work to better myself, to sharpen my skills and to seek out new opportunities and to identify like new paths that I could create. So I think for a long time I was attributing my pride to the organization more so than myself.
Yep.
And my employer did not give me my work ethic. My employer did not give me my integrity or my passion, my motivation, my initiative. I brought that to the table, and my employer was lucky to get it.
Yes. My personal bar is always higher than the one of my employers. And I think, especially, I want to say my generation as well, like early on too, was very super about you have to do Fortune 10 or it has to be Fang. Like I remember even when I did an internship at one point, I'm like, oh, I'm like, oh, I'm here doing internship. Oh, it's not a Fang internship. Oh, it's not like a Facebook, Apple, Google like type of thing. And I was like, but it's an internship. Like I'm doing the best I can do. I'm doing what I need to learn. And like, I'm like, look at everything I built here at this like small little company. I'm like, I did everything from their like AWS infrastructure. I migrated their on-prem. So yeah, that is a great one to point out and highlight. I think we have about a soft 9-minute warning. we'll close out with some future outlook and some advice on their part with our scholars. I want to say, one, what advice do you have to any like future founders aiming to do something similar to you in your field?
Sure. So I will note that I'm not running a product company. So if you aspire to run a product company, just note that this advice may not apply to you. I run a services company, which is an important distinction. So a couple of things to note is number one, getting started is not as hard as all the tech bros make it look. There are a lot of services and a lot of resources for small businesses. I haven't taken any VC money. Everything is bootstrapped because I am my own boss. That is the whole point of this. And so the getting everything set up, there are a lot of like I said, a lot of resources and a lot of services to help you. When I first started my company, my biggest concern was things like payroll, legal, compliance. Like, I'm not an expert in those things, and I don't want to break the law by accident, right? Like, we're going to break the law doing it on purpose. Doing it on accident sucks.
Yep, the IRS
And-
and the government will find you.
and I, you know, I wanted to be compliant, but I was really doubting my ability to know all of the things that I was supposed to do and to do them correctly, right? And what I found is that there are a lot of service providers and a lot of organizations that help you do that part. So that was the part that I was most fearful of. I was like, the client work I can do in my sleep. It's the running the business part that I was worried about. And that did not turn out to be nearly as hard as I thought it was going to be. It is a lot of work, but you know, there's a difference between being a lot of work and being really difficult, right? And it turned out to be a lot of work, but not as difficult as I expected. So that's number one. If that's what you're worried about, I can tell you right now, you can put those concerns aside for now and just get started. The second thing that I will note is if you are doing a services business, your clientele is everything. This is not a product where you launch it into the app store and then market the shit out of it and it, you know, magically becomes a unicorn. If you don't already have relationships in this space, if you don't already have demand for your expertise and your services, it's very difficult to build this business. I delayed starting my company for as long as I did because I needed to make sure that if I started my own business, people would actually buy my services. And I would say about 90% of our clients now are people that I worked with in previous companies who they may have been a junior engineer at the time, but now they're a CISO and they remember working with me and they remember the value and the impact of working with me. And now they have budget and authority, and now those are my clients. So there is also, I think, some strategy around when to launch certain types of businesses. I don't think I could have successfully run this company in my 20s or even early 30s before I had that network of contacts who could potentially become my clients down the road.
Yeah. Okay. I think that wraps up today's session for us. Ralph, I would like to say thank you, Melanie, for joining us today for the Aspire session.
You are so welcome.
I always appreciate talking to you. I also have to schedule my own personal one-on-one with you and go through that. I saw your email when I was Google searching through my email and I noticed it landed in spam. So I'm like, oh, snap. I got to get on that one. Where can our aspirers reach out to you if they have any more questions, or do you want to, this is their moment to prompt a business, prompt a contact, or drop a LinkedIn, they can find out.
Yeah, so it's a very good question, and I will tell you one of the downsides of owning a business is that people are constantly trying to sell you things. So my privacy settings on LinkedIn are pretty locked down because I got so much spam. So it is difficult to connect with me directly on LinkedIn. You can still follow me on LinkedIn, but if you want to have if you follow me on LinkedIn, just shoot. If you go to our website, which is discernibleinc.com, just shoot me a note through our submission form. Let me know that you watched, that you're an Aspire, you watched this, and then I can connect with you on LinkedIn in that way. So I apologize if that's like a couple of steps, but if you want to connect on LinkedIn, that's the best way to do it. So I know that you're a real person
I love that.
and not a bot trying to sell me something that competes with my own business.
Trust our students. A lot of them will watch this later too, and they're like, I'm gonna go click, 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 click. So you'll see them come through on that part. Everyone, that was our fireside chat today. We hope to see you in other MiC programming later this week. Also, we have great news coming. So please, please, please stay up to date on our LinkedIn's, reshare, repost, look at our Instagram. And I can't wait until a couple weeks from now when we have our next guest. And we will be dropping that on LinkedIn for more promo. I hope you all have a great day and an awesome afternoon wherever you are in the world. And we look forward to seeing you again here at Fireside Chat. And I hope to be a host again. Thank you, everybody. And then let me end the YouTube live. Ironically, let me, if I can get this.